Sarah Mitchell moved through the dimly lit hospital corridor with practiced efficiency, her soft-soled shoes making barely a whisper against the linoleum floor. At 42 years old, she had worked the night shift at Mercy General Hospital in Pinewood, Georgia for 3 years now. Most people in this small town knew her as the quiet nurse who always volunteered for the overnight hours, the one who rarely spoke about her past. "Sarah, can you check on Mr. Henderson in 304?" called out Brenda, the charge nurse, from behind the station desk. "He's been asking for more pain medication." "On it," Sarah replied softly, gathering the necessary supplies. As she walked toward the patient's room, she passed two younger nurses huddled near the break room. Their voices carried further than they probably intended. "I don't get why Sarah always takes the graveyard shift," whispered Kelly, a nurse fresh out of school. "It's like she's hiding from something, or maybe she just can't handle working with a real team during the day." "I heard she doesn't have any family," added Jennifer, another young nurse. "No husband, no kids, just comes here and goes home to an empty apartment. Kind of sad, really." Sarah's jaw tightened slightly, but she kept walking. She had heard worse, much worse, and from people who actually mattered. These small-town whispers were nothing compared to what she had endured years ago. The truth was, Sarah Mitchell had plenty of reasons for choosing the night shift. The quiet hours suited her. The darkness felt familiar. And most importantly, the nighttime patients needed her most, when fear crept in and the hospital felt more like a lonely prison than a place of healing. She entered Mr. Henderson's room with a gentle smile. The elderly man lay in his bed, his face creased with pain from the hip surgery he had undergone 2 days earlier. "How are we doing tonight, Mr. Henderson?" Sarah asked, checking his vital signs with efficient hands. "Been better, Sarah," he admitted, his voice weak. "This pain just won't quit." "I know. I'm going to give you something that'll help you rest." She administered the medication carefully, then adjusted his pillows. "You did 2 tours in Vietnam, didn't you? That's what your chart says." Mr. Henderson's eyes brightened slightly. "That's right. 68 and 69. Infantry. You know about military service." Sarah's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes, something old and deep. "A little bit," she said quietly. "My father was in the service." It wasn't technically a lie. Her father had served, but that wasn't where Sarah's knowledge came from. "Well, thank you for taking care of an old soldier," Mr. Henderson said, his medication already beginning to work. "You're good at this, young lady, real good." Sarah smiled genuinely this time. "You rest now. I'll check on you in a couple of hours." She left the room and returned to the nurse's station, where the night settled into its usual rhythm. 3 other nurses worked the floor with her, along with one security guard named Mike who spent most of his time at the front entrance, occasionally walking the halls while scrolling through his phone. Around midnight, Dr. Patricia Chen, the resident on call, emerged from the break room with a cup of coffee. She nodded at Sarah with respect. Unlike the younger nurses, Dr. Chen appreciated Sarah's competence and reliability. "Quiet night so far," Dr. Chen observed. "Let's hope it stays that way." "Agreed," Sarah replied, updating patient charts on the computer. But even as she spoke, Sarah felt something. A tingle at the base of her spine, the same sensation she used to get before missions went sideways. She had learned to trust that feeling a long time ago, in places where ignoring it could get you killed. She glanced toward the elevator bank, then at the stairwell entrance. Everything appeared normal. The hospital's second floor was peaceful, with 20 patients sleeping in various states of recovery. Most were elderly or post-surgical cases. A few were younger, a woman recovering from a car accident, a man with a severe infection. Sarah shook off the feeling. She wasn't in Afghanistan anymore. She wasn't leading rangers through hostile territory. She was in Pinewood, Georgia, in a small hospital where the most exciting thing that usually happened was someone's heart monitor malfunctioning. Still, as she made her rounds through the quiet ward, checking on sleeping patients and adjusting IV lines, Sarah Mitchell remained alert in ways her colleagues never noticed. Because some instincts never die, some training never fades, and some soldiers never really stop being soldiers, no matter how hard they try to blend into normal life. The clock had just struck 1:30 in the morning when Sarah heard the elevator doors open. She glanced up from the medication cart, expecting to see a family member or perhaps a late-arriving doctor. Instead, she saw a man in dark clothing step onto the floor. Something about his movements made her instincts flare immediately. His eyes darted left and right, scanning the area. His right hand was concealed inside his jacket. His jaw was clenched tight, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool hospital air. Sarah's training kicked in instantly. She cataloged every detail in a fraction of a second. Male, approximately 30 years old, 6 feet tall, athletic build, wearing a black jacket too heavy for the mild Georgia night, walking with purpose but also agitation, eyes showing signs of substance use, dilated pupils, rapid movement. Then she saw what she had feared. The man's hand emerged from his jacket, gripping a black semi-automatic pistol. "Nobody move," he shouted, his voice cracking with either fear or drugs, maybe both. "I need medication, I need it now." Kelly, who had been standing near the nurse's station, let out a small scream. Jennifer froze completely, her face draining of color. Dr. Chen took a step backward, her hands rising slowly. "Easy," Dr. Chen said, her voice remarkably steady. "We can help you, just stay calm." "Don't tell me to stay calm," the gunman yelled, waving the weapon erratically. "I'm in pain, I need oxycodone, I need fentanyl, I know you have it. Give it to me now." Sarah remained perfectly still, her mind racing through scenarios. The man was clearly an addict, desperate and dangerous. His finger rested on the trigger with no discipline, no control. He could fire accidentally at any moment. The hospital had security, but Mike was downstairs at the front entrance. By the time he responded, people could be dead. "We'll get you what you need," Dr. Chen said, taking another slow step backward. "But you need to lower the gun. You're scaring the patients." "I don't care about the patients." The gunman swung the weapon toward the nearest patient room. "Get me the drugs or I start shooting." Sarah made a decision. She had to de-escalate this situation before it turned deadly. Slowly, carefully, she moved forward, placing herself between the gunman and the others. "Sir, I'm Sarah," she said quietly, her voice calm and even. "I'm a nurse here. I can access the medication you need, but I need you to point that weapon somewhere safe. You don't want to hurt anyone. I can tell." The gunman swung the pistol towards Sarah, and for a moment she was staring directly down the barrel. Behind her, she heard Kelly whimper. "You don't know anything about me," he snarled. "You're just some night shift nurse. Stay back." "You're right, I don't know you," Sarah replied, not moving. "But I know pain. I know what it's like when it feels like nothing else matters. I'm going to help you, but you need to let me." "Sarah, don't," Dr. Chen whispered urgently. "Step back." But Sarah didn't step back. She stood her ground, her eyes locked on the gunman's face rather than the weapon. In her years as an Army Ranger, she had learned that people telegraphed their intentions through their eyes and body language long before they pulled a trigger. This man was terrified, desperate, but not yet committed to violence. There was still a chance. "Look at me," Sarah said softly. "Not the weapon, look at me. What's your name?" "Shut up," but his voice wavered slightly. "Is it pain or is it withdrawal?" Sarah asked. "Because if it's withdrawal, I can help you through it. We have medication that can ease the symptoms, real help, not just a fix." "You can't help me," he said, but his gun hand dropped slightly. "Nobody can help me." "That's not true. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I promise you we can help, but not like this. Not with a gun. Let me be your advocate here. Let me talk to the doctor about what you need." For a moment, something flickered in the gunman's eyes, Hope, perhaps, or just exhaustion. The weapon lowered another inch. Then patient room 304's door opened. Mr. Henderson, groggy from his pain medication but hearing the commotion, shuffled out into the hallway with his walker. "What's all the noise out here?" the elderly veteran grumbled. "Some of us are trying to sleep." Everything happened at once. The gunman spun toward Mr. Henderson, startled and panicked. His finger jerked on the trigger. Sarah saw it happening as if in slow motion, the tension in his hand, the weapon rising toward an innocent elderly man who had survived Vietnam only to face death in a Georgia hospital. Sarah moved. Years of training, muscle memory, and combat experience took over. She closed the distance between herself and the gunman in 3 quick steps, faster than anyone watching could process. Her left hand shot out and grabbed the weapon's slide, pushing it upward and away from Mr. Henderson even as it fired. The shot went into the ceiling tiles, the sound deafening in the enclosed hallway. In the same fluid motion, Sarah's right hand struck the gunman's wrist with surgical precision, forcing his grip to loosen. She twisted the weapon away from him, simultaneously sweeping his leg with her foot. He went down hard, and Sarah followed him down, her knee on his back, the gun now in her control with practiced efficiency. The entire sequence took less than 3 seconds. The hallway fell silent except for the ringing echoes of the gunshot, and the gunman's labored breathing as Sarah held him securely against the floor. Everyone stared at the quiet night nurse, as if seeing her for the first time. "Don't move," Sarah said firmly, her knee still pressed into the gunman's back. She had already cleared the weapon and set it safely aside but maintained her controlling position. "Security is on the way." Indeed, the sound of running footsteps echoed from the stairwell. Mike, the security guard, burst onto the floor with his radio in hand, his face flushed from sprinting up the stairs. "I called the police," he panted, then stopped short when he saw Sarah holding the man down. "What? How did you?" "There's zip ties in the maintenance closet," Sarah said calmly. "Can you grab them, please?" Mike nodded, still looking stunned, and hurried to retrieve them. Within minutes, the situation was secured. The gunman lay restrained and subdued, no longer a threat. Sarah stood up, brushed off her scrubs, and immediately checked on Mr. Henderson. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked gently, guiding the shaken veteran back toward his room. "You just..." Mr. Henderson stared at her with wide eyes. "Young lady, where did you learn to do that?" Sarah's expression remained neutral. "I took some self-defense classes. Let's get you back to bed. Your heart rate is elevated and you need rest." "Self-defense classes?" Dr. Chen's voice cut through the hallway. She was staring at Sarah with a mixture of shock and something else, realization perhaps. "Sarah, that wasn't just self-defense. That was military combat training, high-level training." Sarah didn't respond. She focused on settling Mr. Henderson back into his bed, checking his vitals, making sure the excitement hadn't caused any complications with his recovery. The police arrived within 10 minutes, 2 officers from the Pinewood Police Department who knew the hospital well. They took statements from everyone, collected the weapon, and arrested the gunman. One officer, a sergeant named Brooks, watched Sarah with particular interest as she gave her statement. "You military?" he asked directly. Sarah hesitated, then nodded once. "Former." "What branch?" "Army." "What did you do in the Army?" Sarah met his eyes. "I'd rather not discuss it." Sergeant Brooks studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. He had seen enough veterans to recognize someone who had done things they didn't talk about. "Fair enough. You probably saved lives tonight. The hospital's lucky to have you." After the police left with the gunman, the remaining hours of the night shift passed in a strange, tense silence. Kelly and Jennifer kept glancing at Sarah as if she were a stranger. Even Dr. Chen seemed uncertain how to act around her. Finally, as dawn began to lighten the sky outside the windows, the day shift arrived. Among them was Sharon, the hospital administrator, who had been called in early because of the incident. "Sarah, can I see you in my office?" Sharon asked, her tone unreadable. Sarah nodded and followed her downstairs. In the small administrative office, Sharon closed the door and gestured for Sarah to sit. "I need to know," Sharon said without preamble. "Your employment application says you were in the Army for 12 years. It says you were discharged honorably, but it doesn't say what you did." "That's correct," Sarah replied. "Sarah, what I saw on the security footage, that wasn't normal. I need to know who I have working in my hospital for everyone's safety." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. She had known this day would come eventually. She had hoped it wouldn't. Had hoped to keep her past buried, but some things couldn't stay hidden forever. "I was a medic," she said finally, "and then I volunteered for special operations. I served with the 75th Ranger Regiment for 8 years. I was one of the first women to pass Ranger School and serve in a combat role." Sharon's eyes widened. "You were an Army Ranger?" "Yes." "Why didn't you put that on your application? That's impressive. That's something to be proud of." Sarah's expression hardened slightly. "Because the last hospital I worked at treated it very differently. When they found out about my background, everything changed. Some people were intimidated. Some people thought I had PTSD and was dangerous. Some people thought a woman claiming to be a ranger was lying for attention. I got tired of the questions, the looks, the assumptions. I just wanted to be a nurse. That's why I moved to Pinewood. Fresh start. No history." Sharon leaned back in her chair, processing this information. "Sarah, you saved lives tonight, probably multiple lives. That man was unstable and armed. If he had started shooting patients or staff." "I know. So why do you seem upset about it?" Sarah looked out the window at the rising sun. "Because now everyone will know, and everything will change, again." She was right. By the end of the week, the story had spread throughout Pinewood like wildfire. The local newspaper ran a front-page article, "Hospital Nurse Reveals Ranger Passed While Stopping Armed Gunman." The regional news picked it up. Social media exploded with shares and comments. Sarah's quiet life was shattered. People started showing up at the hospital asking to meet her. Veterans wanted to shake her hand. Reporters wanted interviews. The hospital administration wanted her to speak at community events, to be a spokesperson for the facility. And the staff's attitudes changed completely. Kelly and Jennifer, who had mocked her just days before, now tried to befriend her, asking questions about her military service and treating her like a celebrity. Other nurses who had barely acknowledged her existence now greeted her warmly in the hallways. Sarah hated all of it. "You're a hero," one of the physicians told her in the break room. "You should be proud." But Sarah didn't feel like a hero. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like a wound that had finally scarred over had been torn open again. Part 4. 2 weeks after the incident, Sarah sat in her small apartment trying to decide what to do. The attention hadn't died down. If anything, it had intensified. The hospital wanted her to accept an award at a public ceremony. The local VFW wanted her to speak at their meeting. A veterans organization wanted to interview her for their podcast. All she wanted was to go back to being invisible. Her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but with a military area code she definitely did recognize: Fort Benning. She answered cautiously, "Hello. Is this Sarah Mitchell?" The voice was male, professional, and familiar in a way that made her chest tighten. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Colonel David Torres, 75th Ranger Regiment. I was your commanding officer 10 years ago. Do you remember me?" Sarah closed her eyes. "Yes, sir, I remember. I saw the news coverage. I wanted to reach out personally. How are you doing, Mitchell?" "I'm managing, sir." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Sarah, I owe you an apology, a long overdue apology." Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. She hadn't expected this. "Sir, when you were with the regiment, I didn't protect you the way I should have. I knew what some of the men were saying. I knew about the hazing, the doubts, the constant questioning of your abilities. I told myself it was part of the process, that you needed to prove yourself just like everyone else. But I was wrong." Sarah felt something twist in her chest. Memories she had buried deep began surfacing. The late-night conversations she had overheard, men in her unit questioning whether a woman belonged in the Rangers. The missions where she had to work twice as hard to get half the credit. The incident that had finally broken her. "Sir, that was a long time ago," she said quietly. "It was, but I've been watching the news and I've been reading the comments online. People are doing the same thing to you now that they did back then, questioning your story, saying women weren't allowed in combat roles during your service time, calling you a liar. And I realized I have information that could help you." "What do you mean?" "Sarah, you were part of a classified pilot program. The military was already integrating women into special operations units before it became public policy. Your service record is partially sealed because of that program, but I have the authority to declassify portions of it. With your permission, I can release documentation that proves you served exactly as you say you did, that you earned your Ranger tab, that you completed multiple combat deployments, that you were awarded a Silver Star for valor." Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. She had been awarded the Silver Star in a closed ceremony, with no public acknowledgement because her mission had been classified. Most of her service records were still sealed. When she had tried to tell people about her military career, she had no way to prove most of it. "Why now, sir?" she asked, her voice rough with emotion. "Why after all these years?" "Because I watched what happened to you at the end of your service. I watched good men, men I respected, turn on you when that mission went wrong. I watched them blame you for casualties that were in no way your fault. I watched the investigation clear you completely, but I also watched your reputation get destroyed anyway. And I didn't fight hard enough for you then. I'm fighting for you now." Sarah remembered that mission with painful clarity. An operation in Afghanistan that had gone sideways. 3 Rangers killed when their vehicle hit an IED. Sarah had been leading that patrol. The investigation had shown she had followed protocols perfectly, that the IED was undetectable, that no one could have prevented those deaths. But some of the men had whispered anyway, said a woman wasn't cut out for combat leadership, said she had made a mistake that killed their brothers. The whispers had been quiet enough that no official action was taken, but loud enough to make her daily life unbearable. She had left the army with an honorable discharge and full benefits. On paper, her career had ended well. In reality, it had ended in heartbreak and isolation. "If you release those records, sir, my privacy is gone forever," Sarah said. "Everyone will know everything." "I know. That's why I'm asking for your permission. But Sarah, I'm also asking you to consider this. Those young women who are serving as Rangers now, who face doubt and discrimination, they need to know about pioneers like you. Your story matters. What you accomplished matters." Sarah was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "Let me think about it, sir." "Take all the time you need. But Mitchell, I'm proud to have served with you. I should have said that 10 years ago. I'm saying it now." After the call ended, Sarah sat in her apartment as the sun set outside her window. She thought about the 3 Rangers who had died on that mission. She thought about their families. She thought about the years she had spent trying to forget, trying to build a new life, trying to be just a normal nurse in a normal town. Then she thought about Mr. Henderson, the elderly Vietnam veteran who had looked at her with such respect after she had saved his life. She thought about the young nurses who might benefit from knowing that women could be warriors and healers both. She picked up her phone and called Colonel Torres back. The documents that Colonel Torres released were extensive and undeniable. Sarah's complete service record, Photos of her in uniform with her Ranger tab clearly visible, mission reports with her name leading successful operations, and the citation for her Silver Star. The Silver Star citation was particularly powerful. It described how Captain Sarah Mitchell had, under heavy enemy fire in Afghanistan, led her team to rescue 4 wounded soldiers from an ambush. Despite being injured herself, she had provided medical care under fire, coordinated air support, and successfully extracted all casualties. 3 lives had been saved directly because of her actions. The local newspaper ran a follow-up story, but this time with the full truth. National news picked it up. Veterans organizations shared the story widely. Within days, Sarah Mitchell went from being a controversial figure to being recognized as a genuine American hero. But the most important response came from somewhere Sarah hadn't expected. A letter arrived at the hospital, forwarded to Sarah from the newspaper. It was from Jennifer Patterson, the widow of one of the Rangers who had died on that mission 10 years ago, the mission that had haunted Sarah ever since. The letter was handwritten, the words careful and heartfelt. Dear Sarah, my name is Jennifer Patterson. You knew my husband, Staff Sergeant Marcus Patterson. He died on the mission in Afghanistan that I now understand you led. For years, I was told by some of Marcus's friends that there were questions about the leadership on that mission. I was never told details, but the implication was always there, that someone had made a mistake. I recently saw your story in the news and recognized your name. I requested the full investigation report through a Freedom of Information Act request. I read it completely. Sarah, there was no mistake. There was no error in judgment. There was an undetectable IED and 3 good men who died doing their duty. The investigation said that repeatedly. But I also learned something else. I learned that you were the one who provided medical care to Marcus in his final moments. You were the one who held his hand. You were the one who he spoke his last words to, words you apparently relayed to his family through official channels, though you never identified yourself. I want you to know that those last words, Marcus telling me he loved me and asking me to be strong for our daughter, those words have sustained me for 10 years. You gave me that gift. I also want you to know that I'm sorry. I'm sorry that anyone ever blamed you for his death. I'm sorry that you've carried this burden. And I'm grateful that you survived, that you continued to serve, and that you're now saving lives as a nurse. Thank you for your service. Thank you for honoring my husband's memory by continuing to be a hero. With deep respect and gratitude. Jennifer Patterson. Sarah read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. It was a weight she hadn't known she could ever put down. The following week, the hospital held a small ceremony, not the grand public event they had originally planned, but something Sarah had agreed to. It was attended by hospital staff, local veterans, and members of the community. Mr. Henderson stood up to speak, leaning on his walker but standing straight with military bearing. I served in Vietnam, he said to the assembled crowd. I saw combat, I saw heroes, and I'm here to tell you that Sarah Mitchell is one of them, not just because she stopped an armed gunman, though that took guts, but because she's been here every night for 3 years taking care of sick people and dying people and scared people, and she never asked for credit. She never bragged. She just did the work. That's what real heroes do. Dr. Chen spoke next. Sarah taught me something important, she said. She taught me that heroism isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's showing up for the night shift when everyone else wants the day shift. Sometimes it's holding a patient's hand when they're scared. Sometimes it's doing the right thing even when no one's watching. Sarah does all of that every single night. Finally, Sharon, the hospital administrator, presented Sarah with a simple plaque. It didn't mention her military service or the gunman. It simply said, "To Sarah Mitchell, for exemplary dedication to patient care and to the safety of all." Sarah accepted it with a quiet thank you, and the ceremony ended. But afterwards, as people mingled and talked, Something happened that meant more to Sarah than any award. Kelly, the young nurse who had mocked her weeks ago, approached hesitantly. "Sarah, I need to apologize," she said, her face red with embarrassment. "I said terrible things about you. I judged you without knowing anything about you. I'm so sorry." Sarah looked at the young woman, so fresh from nursing school, so inexperienced in the ways life could knock you down and rebuild you. "Kelly, do you know why I work nights?" Sarah asked. Kelly shook her head. "Because that's when patients are most vulnerable. That's when they wake up scared and alone. That's when they need someone who won't panic, who can handle emergencies, who can keep them safe. I work nights because that's where I can do the most good." It was never about hiding or failing or being antisocial. It was always about serving. "I understand now," Kelly said, "and I want to be that kind of nurse too. Will you teach me?" Sarah smiled, a real genuine smile. "I'd be happy to." 6 months later, Sarah was still working the night shift at Mercy General Hospital. The media attention had faded. Life had returned to a new kind of normal, one where people knew her story but had learned to see past it to the person she actually was. She had started teaching self-defense classes for hospital staff on her days off. She had begun mentoring young nurses who wanted to learn from her experience. She had even started attending the local VFW meetings, connecting with other veterans who understood the difficult transition from military to civilian life. One evening, as Sarah made her rounds, she stopped in to check on a new patient, a young woman who had been in a car accident and was facing months of recovery. "I'm scared," the woman admitted. "I don't know if I can do this." Sarah pulled up a chair and sat down beside the bed. "Let me tell you something," she said gently. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway. You're going to recover from this. It's going to be hard and there will be days when you want to quit, but you're stronger than you know, and I'm going to be here every night to remind you of that." The young woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." Sarah stood up and adjusted the woman's blankets. "Get some rest now. I'll check on you in a couple of hours." As she walked back down the quiet hospital corridor, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. She had spent a decade running from her past, ashamed of the way her military career had ended, convinced that her story was one of failure. But she understood now that she had never failed. She had survived. She had continued serving. She had found new ways to be a hero, quieter ways perhaps, but no less important. The night shift at Mercy General Hospital went on, patients sleeping peacefully under Sarah Mitchell's watchful care. And somewhere in the building, in rooms lit only by the soft glow of medical equipment, lives were being saved by the quiet night nurse who was so much more than she appeared. Some heroes wear uniforms and lead soldiers into battle. Others wear scrubs and walk hospital hallways in the darkest hours of the night. Sarah Mitchell had been both, and she had finally learned that both were worthy of honor, respect, and pride.